The first writing anchor is about writing arguments to support claims. And it's an analysis of topics in text using that valid reasoning and the relevant and sufficient evidence. In my classroom, it's always support your claims with evidence. So I'm going to model for you how I respond to a text. And I'm going to use the wordless picture book, A Ball for Daisy. I personally like using wordless picture books in my classroom, particularly with my gifted students, because it encourages a lot of interpretation and higher level thinking. This particular text, I feel, expresses a lot of emotion through the illustrations. And I particularly love the section where after the ball pops, you see how the mood starts to change. I love how the dog is walking home now. Or at least I'm inferring that the dog is walking home now. With his head down very low, nose almost dragging the ground. To me, this creates quite a mood. So I'm going to use this particular part as I plan my response. Now, when I sketch my plan, it is like I'm creating a small storyboard. I can use this process with any type of writing I do. Rather than teach children to use a range of graphic organizers, I find that I can adapt any graphic organizer into this. And so in my classroom, my students write letters to me responding to what they've read. I do guide them into an introduction and a conclusion part. And so I might model for them to be sure that they've got that in their plan, starting with an introduction and a conclusion. You can turn it this way if you like. There's no boundaries with this. This then leaves my middle section for the meat of my plan. Now, even kindergarten students can use this sketching and planning method to state what a favorite book is and give reasons why. And again, drawing is where that thinking best occurs in our younger students. I'm going to kind of come at this from a second grade standpoint, where a student is expected to introduce a book that they're writing about, state an opinion, and supply some reasons to support that opinion, and then to give a conclusion. Now, the introduction, of course, includes the part with the title of the book, and I like that a student can easily copy that. Now, I'm just planning my thoughts, so of course I can draw. It's about this dog named Daisy who loves his or her ball. How does it end? Well, after Daisy's ball pops, Daisy's owner gets Daisy a brand new ball, and that makes Daisy very happy. It's just helping me think about what it is I want to state when I write. Now comes my opinion. I'm writing like my students today. Now comes my opinion. What do I think? Okay, so I like how there's a lot of darkness in the illustrations, and how the author shows Daisy with her head way down to the ground. It shows me how sad she feels. Why do I like this part? Or why do I like this in the book? It's because I can make a connection. Of course, in my classroom, we talk about linking with connections. I can connect to that very sad feeling myself, and how I would hang my head very low if I were feeling sad like that. Quick, simple, sketched plan. I make sure that I teach my students that the planning process is not a detailed illustration. It should be a quick sketch. We don't have to be fabulous artists for this. For this reason, I don't allow my students to use any kind of coloring material. I want the plan to be simple. I want to emphasize that the plan is for them. It's not to share with others. And it needs to be simple because I teach my students that they use this as they write. They can always go back to it and refer to it if they forget about what they're thinking or if our writing happens to take place over the course of several days. Okay, so this is how I teach students to use a plan to draft their writing. I always teach my students to do a main idea and at least 2 details for each section that they create in their plan. For my youngest students, I actually start with just 1 picture, 1 main idea, 2 details, and then we can build from there. Here I've written a main idea sentence. I read a ball for Daisy, and on my plan I checked that I did that. It is about a dog who loves her red ball. There's a supporting detail. Now I need another detail. So I'll add, one day her owner takes her to the park. So again, I'm teaching my students to check as they write. Now, what I found is that when I conference with students, if they've started writing, I'll pull their plan back out and look for those check marks and then actually start to match up. While I don't like to say, you know what, for every check there should be a sentence, because I find that it ties students into that. If I need to use that as an anchor, I can. If they've written, but they've not checked with the plan, it's a good point to go back and check with them and say, okay, well, I noticed you do have 3 details. Or I noticed here that you don't have a detail to support this part. What could we do to add one? That's where these extra spaces fit in, because then a detail can easily be squeezed in. So as my students move through the use of their plan, that's what they do. They check off their thinking. Here's a sample. This particular student was using a structure of first, next, then, after, and finally. So we kind of have a 5 steps to sequence their event. You see how in each part they've done that main idea. In this part they've added an extra detail, which is always fine. Same here. Now the student got to the end and wrapped up their text and didn't check that, which is okay. For me, I find that this builds that internal thinking. And I've actually had students who later have become so comfortable with the process they aren't even sketching out plans, but I notice how they simply just put small check marks at the top of their page. That's my ultimate goal, to take this thinking process and transfer it into an automatic thinking response.